Story 1. So I was hanging out with some friends in this town in Minnesota where a lot of us Hmong people live. Anyway, we were at this house near the edge of town, close to some woods. The trees were thick, and there was this little path leading into them. Everyone said it was a shortcut to the old cemetery, but I never bothered with it. Creepy stuff, you know? We were just sitting around, laughing and telling stories, and at some point someone brought up ghost stories. You know how it goes. Everyone starts trying to one-up each other with the scariest thing they've heard. Most of it was dumb stuff. People seeing shadows or hearing footsteps at night. Then my friend Sam started talking about the Hmong sleep demon. He said his uncle saw it once and barely made it out alive. That got us all quiet for a bit. After a while, the night got late and people started heading home. I was one of the last ones to leave. I don't even know why I stayed so late, but you know how sometimes you just lose track of time? That was me. When I finally decided to leave, I stepped outside, and man, it was dark. There weren't any streetlights out there, just the moon and the stars, and even those felt like they were hiding. I started walking down the dirt road back to my place. It wasn't far, just a few blocks, but it felt like forever. The whole way I kept hearing these weird noises, like rustling in the bushes. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just the wind or maybe some stray animal. But then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps, coming from behind me. I stopped and turned around, but there was nothing there. Just the empty road and the woods to my right. I laughed it off, trying to act cool, but deep down, I was starting to feel that tight knot of fear in my chest. You know that feeling, right? Like when you know something's not right, but you can't figure out what. I kept walking, trying to ignore it, but then I heard it again. This time it was closer. I turned around so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. That's when I saw him, or it. I don't even know. There was this man standing at the edge of the woods, just barely in the light of the moon. He was wearing this old tattered jacket, and his head was kind of tilted to the side like he was studying me. "Hey, you lost?" I called out, trying to sound braver than I felt. The man didn't say anything. He just stood there staring at me. That's when I noticed his face. It was pale, too pale, like he hadn't seen the sun in years. His eyes were dark, and his mouth was twisted into this weird, crooked grin. I don't know why, but something about him just felt wrong. It wasn't just how he looked. It was the way he stood there, so still, like he wasn't even breathing. "All right, man, whatever," I said, turning to walk away. I didn't want to deal with whatever this was, but as soon as I started moving, I heard him step out onto the road. His footsteps were slow and creepy, like he was trying to keep pace with me. I didn't dare look back. I picked up my pace, my heart pounding in my ears. The faster I walked, the faster his footsteps got. It was like he was matching my every move. By the time I reached my house, I was practically running. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it, my hands shaking so bad I could barely turn the latch. For a while I just stood there, listening. The night was quiet again, but I couldn't get rid of the feeling that he was still out there. I finally worked up the courage to peek out the window. At first I didn't see anything, but then I caught a glimpse of movement by the edge of the woods. It was him. He was just standing there, staring at my house. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, but eventually I forced myself to go to bed. I thought maybe if I just ignored it, it would go away. But that night, I had the worst dream. I was back on that road, but everything was dark. Darker than it should have been. The man was there, standing in the middle of the road, his grin even wider than before. He started walking toward me, and no matter how much I tried to run, I couldn't move. It was like my feet were stuck to the ground. When he finally reached me, he leaned in close, so close I could feel his cold breath on my skin. Then he whispered something in Hmong, something I'll never forget. "You saw me. Now you're mine." I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing. For a moment I thought it was just a nightmare, but then I heard it. The sound of footsteps outside my window, slow, heavy footsteps, circling the house. I wanted to scream, but my voice was caught in my throat. I just sat there, clutching my blanket like a lifeline, praying for it to stop. Eventually the footsteps faded, but I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning I told my grandma about it. She's one of those old-school Hmong ladies who knows all the traditional stuff. When I described the man, her face went serious. "You saw a ghost tied to the land. If you see one, it means they've chosen you." "Chosen me for what?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. She didn't answer. She just started burning incense and chanting under her breath. After that, weird things kept happening. I'd hear footsteps outside my house at night or see shadows moving out of the corner of my eye. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I asked my grandma what to do, and she told me I needed to go back to the woods and apologize. "Apologize for what?" I asked. "For disturbing him," she said. So a few days later I went back. It was broad daylight, but I was still scared out of my mind. I stood at the edge of the woods and said a prayer, asking for forgiveness. I don't know if it worked, but after that, things started to quiet down. The footsteps stopped and I didn't see the man anymore. Story 2. So back then, I used to hang out at this spot near the old mill. It was just an empty field now, but everyone called it the haunted field. Why? I have no idea. Maybe it was because of the way the frost made it look in winter, or maybe because of something else. Who knows? Anyway, one night, my buddy Lee and I decided to hang out there. It was quiet, kind of peaceful in its own weird way. We brought some snacks and just sat there talking about random stuff. Lee started talking about this girl he liked, and I was just teasing him about how he'd never have the guts to actually talk to her. You know how it is. Out of nowhere, Lee says, "You ever hear about the ghost lady around here?" I laughed it off, thinking he was just trying to freak me out, but he wasn't laughing. He looked serious, like dead serious. He said, "No, I'm not kidding. They say she shows up when you're alone out here, especially if you're not supposed to be here." I rolled my eyes. "Come on, Lee, that's just one of those old stories." But Lee wouldn't drop it. He said his cousin swore he saw her once, and ever since, he never came back to the haunted field. I just shrugged. I wasn't buying it. After a while, Lee said he needed to head home because his mom was going to get mad if he stayed out too late. He left, and I stayed behind. I wasn't ready to leave yet. The night was quiet, and honestly, it felt kind of nice being out there alone. That's when it started. I was just sitting there, staring at the stars, when I heard it. At first I thought it was the wind. It was soft, kind of like a hum or maybe a song. I couldn't make out the words, but it felt off. Like it wasn't just some random noise, it had a rhythm, a melody. I stood up and looked around, thinking maybe Lee was messing with me, but there was no one there. Just me and the empty field. The sound kept getting louder though, and it was coming from behind me. When I turned around, my heart dropped. There was a woman standing in the middle of the field. She wasn't there before, I swear. She was wearing this long, white dress that looked old, like something from a wedding or something. Her hair was long and black, hanging down to her waist, and it was covering most of her face. I froze. I didn't know what to do. She wasn't moving, just standing there. But I felt like her eyes were on me, even though I couldn't see them. My chest got tight, and I started to feel like I couldn't breathe. Then she moved. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were stuck. She stopped about 10 feet away from me. That's when I heard her voice. "Why are you here?" It was soft, but sharp, like it was cutting through the air. I couldn't answer. My mouth was dry and my brain was screaming at me to do something, anything, but I couldn't move. Then she tilted her head to the side, and I swear I saw her smile. It wasn't a friendly smile, though. It was wrong. She asked again, "Why are you here?" That snapped me out of it. I stumbled backward, almost falling, and finally my legs started working again. I turned and ran as fast as I could. I don't know how I made it out of that field, but when I got to my car, I jumped in and locked the doors. I sat there for a sec, trying to catch my breath when I saw her again. She was standing at the edge of the field, right where the grass ended and the dirt road began. Her face was still hidden by her hair, but I could feel her eyes on me. My whole body was shaking and I fumbled with my keys, trying to start the car. When I finally got it started, I looked up and she was gone, just like that. No trace of her, no sound, nothing. I drove straight home that night and didn't tell anyone what happened, not even Lee. For days I couldn't stop thinking about her, replaying everything in my head. A week later, I ran into Lee again, and he asked why I hadn't been back to the haunted field. I just shrugged and said I was busy. I didn't want to talk about it, but Lee gave me this weird look, like he knew. "You saw her, didn't you?" he asked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He just nodded and said, "Told you she's real." Since then, I've stayed away from that place. I don't even drive near it anymore. And that's a wrap for today. I hope you enjoyed the stories. If you did, be sure to explore more videos on the screens above or visit my channel for more content. Hit subscribe to stay updated with my latest videos. Stay safe and see you next time.